A gangland murder in Belfast of the underworld's most wanted man. Hitman Robbie Lawlor had countless enemies, but who ordered his death? This month, Crime World presents Double Cross, the murder of Robbie Lawlor, a podcast series that will bring you right into the black heart of organised crime. Based on my new book, Web of Betrayal, we'll follow a bloody trail into the underworld and to the narco-style murder and dismemberment of teenager Cian Mulready Woods, which would set in motion the complex plot to take out Lawlor. Listen as we lift the lid on the inner workings of Ireland's gangland, revealing a cast of ruthless characters who take centre stage for their place in this real-life double-cross thriller. Crime World presents Double Cross, coming soon to all podcast platforms. Web of Betrayal by me, Nicola Tallant, is now available on Audible and in all good bookstores. Clodagh, day 7 in the trial of Conor McGregor and James Lawrence, who have been accused of rape by the hairdresser Nikita Hand. Both have denied that allegation and said they had consensual sex with her. McGregor's back in the stand.
Yes, back in the stand this morning for approximately, I'm going to say about an hour to 2 hours, right before lunch. So he brought us right up to lunchtime. And later on in the day, we heard from James Lawrence as well as 2 other witnesses. So this morning, Conor McGregor's cross-examination began with Mr. Gordon for Nikita Hand's legal counsel. And he wanted to bring Conor McGregor briefly back to a series of interviews that he had with the Gardaí, and he put it to Conor McGregor that the first one was on the 17th of January at about midday, to which he agreed. And this statement, when he made this statement to the Gardaí, he was accompanied by his solicitor. On that occasion, he gave a statement that was written out, and it was put to him that it was a prepared statement. And Conor said that he couldn't recall. It was then put to him that he was given the booklet of interviews from the Gardaí, flicked to page, whatever it was, the 17th of January 2019, with his solicitor, Aoife Corrigan, gave a statement at Dundrum Garda Station. And he says that, yes, he recognised this statement. This was the statement given on that day and time. And he said that he went to the Gardaí with a solicitor. It was a pre-arranged appointment for him to go in and give this statement. So it was put to him that he made the statement in his own words, but this 2-page handwritten document was in Miss Corrigan's handwriting, so in a solicitor's handwriting, and he agreed with that. Then it was put to him that after he read this prepared statement in Miss Corrigan's handwriting to the Gardaí, Gardaí asked him a series of questions, and his answers to each of these questions was no comment. There was over 100 questions put to him, and in each of them he said no comment. And Conor McGregor said to that on the stand today, "No, this is the first time something like this had happened to me. I was beyond petrified with the seriousness of the allegations." He said that during periods of the interview, he said no comment. It was put to him that there was over 150 questions in which he was asked, to which he said no comment to all of them. And he said, "I was advised." He said, I told my series of events and I was advised. It was put to him that the statement he gave was quite short. And he said, "I just gave the information surrounding the incident. It's to the point." And he said, "I would have loved to go into the top of the mountains and shout from all of the hilltops with the seriousness of these allegations." It was then put to him that if it wasn't for his lawyers, he wouldn't have fully cooperated with the Gardaí, to which he said he just took the advice that he was given. He said it was the first time that something like that had ever happened to him in his life, and it was a complete alien situation to him. Then it was put to him that he wanted to get it all out. And he said, "Yes, that's why I'm here to help." And Mr. Gordon said, "How do you want to help?" And he said, "I'm here to speak my piece. The allegations are false and I just want to say the truth." It was then put to him that the statement on the 17th of January that was given to the Gardaí that day was written by his solicitor. And he was asked if it was a collaborative affair, so if they had both written that statement together, and he agreed. As part of that statement, he said that he went to the Beacon Hotel with James, Nikita and one of her friends, and they were driven there by one of his drivers, who he said is also one of his security guards. They went to the penthouse suite. He was in the sitting room with everyone. He went into the bedroom. Nikita followed him in. He said there was, quote, physical sex in multiple positions. And in one instance, then he went on to describe the different ways in which they had sex. he said, we were both enjoying ourselves and having a good time. She was pulling my legs to wake me up. She wanted to have sex again. At different points, he said, I remember her saying, fuck me, and moaning in pleasure throughout the time that they were allegedly having sex. He said that he didn't use a condom during this time, and he also ejaculated at least once. He said that when he wanted to leave, Nikita kept pulling him, trying to get him to stay. And he said, in regards to the allegation that had been put to him, that he was shocked that it had been made. He said, it's completely false, and I'm shocked that this allegation has even been made. Mr. Gordon was clarifying to him that this is what he said in a statement. So in his statement, he said, how do you know Nikita Hand? Conor replied, no comment. Is she from the same area as you in Crumlin? And Conor McGregor replied, no comment. To which he said on the stand today that he did that, saying no comment to those questions in the stand because that was the advice from his lawyers. It was then put to him that the interview with Gardaí went on like that for over 150 questions or so. And this is when the judge interjected and said that Mr. McGregor is entitled to do that on the advice of his lawyers. Everyone's entitled to you know, say no comment. You're not obliged to say anything. But again, he warned the jury that you can't draw any adverse inferences that you're but you are entitled to do it. Then Mr. Gordon moved on to the second interview that Conor McGregor gave on that day, and it was at 4:30 p.m. And at this point, when he gave this statement to Gardaí, Mr. Gordon told the court that Conor McGregor had seen various pieces of CCTV and things like that, to which Conor agreed. Then he had another interview later that evening at 9 o'clock at night. And on this occasion, the guards explained large parts of Nikita Hand's statement to him and to solicitor, and he agreed. Then it was put to him that between those two interviews from 4:30 and 9:30, he had seen photographs of Miss Hand's bruising for the very first time, and he agreed with that. It was then put to him that he furnished his second statement to the guards, and that was the statement in which he expressed shock, to which he agreed. Then he was put to him that when we went through his statement yesterday, and he had said something about marks on the plaintiff, so on Mr. Gordon's client, Nikita Hand. He said, I'm shocked I didn't cause them. Are you sure she didn't have sex with anyone else? And McGregor agreed, yes. It was then put to him later that he said to Gardaí at 1:14 a.m, you said, I'm certain Nikita at all times was consenting. I believe she had sex with James Lawrence when we left the hotel. And it was put to him, this was the first time that he had mentioned James Lawrence. So this is at 1:14 a.m. in the early hours of the following morning. And he agreed. He said the next day, I said, how did you get on? So he had a conversation with James Lawrence in the period after the alleged events. He said the next day he spoke to him on the phone and said, like, you know, how did you get on? How are you? And he said at the time there was some media stuff circulating around about a sports star. And he had told James Lawrence that it wasn't him, that it couldn't have been him. It was then put to him the question, why did you then pose the question to Gardaí, are you sure she didn't have sex with anyone else at this point in time? And he said, I went to my lawyers and they gave me advice, and I gave my version of events, and I took their advice. Then he was asked if the statement was written by the solicitors or not, and he agreed it was. It was written with their help. And it was put to him that what he said was just what he wanted the Gardaí to hear at that time. And he said, you know, solicitors don't write statements for their clients. And he says, I told them what happened and they guided me on that. He said, I'm very scared here. I'm in a cell. I took advice from my lawyer. I described it as an alien situation with dire consequences. He said that the first time he had seen pictures of Nikita Hand was the morning after the alleged incident, and he agreed. And he said, you expressed shock to convey it wasn't you at this point. And he agreed with
Pictures
that. Pictures of Nikita Hand's injuries.
Injuries, okay.
Injuries, yeah. It was then put to him, was it in your mind that Mr. Lawrence could take the fall? And Conor replied, no. Who would ever believe something like this? How silly. What do you mean by this? Not an iota. His initial reaction was shock, and he conveyed such a reaction in order to disassociate himself completely, therefore suggesting that she had sex with somebody else.
This was under arrest?
This was under arrest, yes, but this is under cross-examination. It's put to him that he conveyed shock because he wanted to disassociate himself from the suggestion that he had sex.
And
with her.
were they talking about him conveying shock while under arrest or in?
While under arrest.
Yes, while under arrest, yeah.
So during those Garda interviews. Yes. Then with regards to the bruises, he says that he didn't cause the bruises. It's most likely she did have sex with somebody else. And it's then put to him, well, then who's the third person she had sex with? And he replied, and this is all on the stand today, now we're back on the stand. And he said she had sex with multiple different people. And it was asked him, what are you saying? And he said, well, your client said, your client had sex with multiple people. And it was put to him, well, who are these people? And he said, me and James is who he was aware of. And it was put to him that he was speculating she had sex with somebody else. And he said, not unless she had sex in the salon or in the grill or in airfield. He doesn't know. It was put to him again that he was speculating on this. And he said she had sex with at least 2 people that night. It was then put to him that he was suggesting she was having sex with a third person or had sex with a third person. And he said, no, she had sex multiple times. If she had sex with somebody else, I'm not suggesting. I don't know. It was then put to him that between Mr. McGregor and Mr. Lawrence, they weren't sure how to play this. And Conor said, there is no play. I put down my story and what happened that evening. He then said, this is a grave situation that he's in. It was then put to him that he said, are you sure she didn't have sex with anyone else in a Garda interview? And then an hour later said, at all times she was consenting what we did together. And I believe she had sex with James Lawrence when I left the hotel. And it's put to him that this is the first time that the Gardaí had heard that James Lawrence had sex with Nikita Hand, to which he agreed. The next line of questioning is in relation to Mr. Lawrence and his solicitors. It was put to him that he had advised Mr. Lawrence to go to a solicitor, and he said no. Mr. Gordon then said that he went to your firm. Conor said, yeah, I said my piece and my lawyers advised me from there. It was then asked of him, are you aware that Mr. Lawrence went to your law firm at the time? And he said, I don't remember. It was then put to him that Mr. Lawrence wouldn't have the fees to pay for a solicitor. And he said, no, he wouldn't. It was then put to him that he paid for his fees. And he said, he's my friend. It's quite possible I paid for him. He said, I get staggering legal fees in relation to these lies. I don't check them. It was then put to him by the judge, did you pay for his legal fees or did you not? And Conor replied, I believe I did. It was then put to him that he is close friends with James Lawrence, and he had a close involvement in how Mr. Lawrence portrayed himself in all of this, referring to the court case. And he said, I've said my piece in this, it's serious. It was then put to him that he speculated at length about where Nikita Hand got her bruising from. It was put to him that he had mentioned that it was from a swan dive into the bath, that she had 3 nights out, and who knows what happened at Airfield, and he agreed with that. It was then put to him that it was the first time he had said any of that, and Mr. McGregor said yes. In my own self, I was trying to figure out why and where. It was put to him that none of this was mentioned to the Gardaí, to which he agreed. He said, then I had no access to what he had access to when the statement of discovery was presented. So it was put to him that not long before, he had seen pictures of the injuries, the CCTV, and the large extracts of what she had said to Gardaí. Did he at no point come to those conclusions about where she got her bruises from? And he said, no, it wasn't until later, until he got a full picture of what happened at the time and he got the CCTV to piece it together, that he then made those assumptions. It was then put to him by Mr. Gordon. He said, am I correct to put to you again that in your evidence in court yesterday, you never stated to anyone that those injuries might have been caused by her knocking about for 3 days or so? And Conor replied, yes, publicly. Yes, that's the first time he ever said it. I haven't never had the chance to speak about this publicly before. It was then asked, did you ever tell your solicitor either? To which the judge interjected and said at this point that those particular allegations about where she may have got her bruising from were never actually put to the plaintiff during any sort of cross-examination. So the next line of questioning then was in relation to whether or not Miss Hand was wearing a tampon during the alleged incident. Yesterday it was put to him that he said on more than one occasion she wasn't wearing a tampon when they had sex, to which he agreed. He was then asked, Mr. Gordon asked Mr. McGregor if he could bring him back to the evidence of Dr. Kane, who was the first witness on the stand, who was the doctor who gave evidence about removing the tampon from Nikita Hand's vagina. And he said, yes, he remembers the evidence. And Mr. Gordon then read some of that report that he gave into the court. It was in relation to him using a speculum. The tampon was visualised in the right side of the cervix at the very top of the vagina. He then had to use a polyforceps to remove the tampon, and it was breaking apart to a point that he was afraid he might have left some parts of it in her. Mr. Gordon put it to him that there was no issue of where the tampon was found, and he presumed that Conor McGregor didn't disagree with that, to which he agreed. He said, no, he doesn't disagree. And then he referred back to evidence given yesterday by Dr. Charlotte Murphy. He said she gave DNA re-evidence, to which Conor McGregor said he wasn't there. Mr. Gordon put it to him that I'm sure his lawyers have a copy. The judge then said Mr. McGregor can't speak to his lawyers in the middle of a cross-examination. So Mr. Gordon then just got to the conclusion, and he said that his conclusion was that Dr. Charlotte Murphy found your DNA precisely where Dr. Kane found the tampon, to which Mr. Farrell, for Conor McGregor's legal counsel, interjected and said that they were swabs. So then continuing in relation to the tampon, he said you didn't in your earlier statements or before say that there was no tampon, and he said he wasn't sure. He believed if he did say that, he would have been saying it from the outset. But this in particular wasn't put to Miss Hand, that she hadn't been wearing a tampon at all. Mr. McGregor said, I've said my piece about what happened on the events and took the advice of my lawyers. To which it was put to him, does he see the significance of that? And Conor said, I said it was not there. It was broad daylight. If there was a tampon or she was on her cycle, I wouldn't have had sex. It was then put to him that was a significant issue in the case, to which he said, I don't know. Mr. Gordon repeated, you don't know. To which Conor said, no. The issue is she's saying I forced her to do so falsely. Mr. Gordon then said, if it's your case, there was no tampon, it would have been known at an early stage, to which Conor McGregor said, I can't answer. Then it was put to him that she had a tampon up in the right top corner of her vagina, and was it a fact that we could all agree on, to which he said it was. And when asked how it got there, he said, I don't know, it wasn't from me. Then some attention is turned to the booking of the hotel. So this is in relation to the head of his security team, he's the owner of a professional security company who are employed by Conor McGregor, and was employed by Conor McGregor from about 2016 till about 2020. And it's put to him that Gazine had ordered the room at about 4:30 that morning for him, to which he agreed, yes, that was something that had happened. As Mr. Gordon went through some of the evidence in relation to the logistics of that, he was asked, had he been to the Beacon before? And Conor said yes. People at the hotel knew who he was. He was then asked if he'd done this before, and he said, if you go out on a Saturday evening and it's a late night, I'd usually get a hotel room to sleep, shower, eat and get dressed. It's a thing he would have done before. It was then put to him that he lived in the K Club near Naas, County Kildare, and he said yes. And it was put to him that, it wouldn't be only about 20, 22 minutes away from where we were staying. And so it was put to him by Mr. Gordon, I suggest to you the reason you have hotels at night time is to bring back girls for sex. And he said, no, I'd bring back people for a party and for myself to get rested, get refreshed, use the gym, have breakfast. He was asked if he had a few girls with him while he was in the club, and he said, yes, he did. There was a crew of them in the car. It was put to him that after he booked the Beacon, the girls that were with him at the end of the night, at the end of the nightclub, wanted to go home. So this was about 6 a.m. in the morning when they left Crystal nightclub, where they ended up after being in District 8. At about 6, 7 o'clock in the morning, those girls wanted to go home. He did agree that he did drop them home. He dropped one back to Clontarf. And it was about 7 a.m. and the girls were gone home. Mr. McGregor said it was a party of people. And at this point, it was put to him that he had contacted Nikita Hand, to which he agreed. It was put to him that he contacted her because she was to be a replacement for the other girls who had left. He said, I was still partying, they were still partying. There was an invite to go to a party in the salon. And it was put to him that yesterday in a statement when he said he was invited to the salon, that was the first time he had ever publicly said that. And he said, not publicly. He said, my story has never weaned. It's been exactly the same. There was an invite to go to the salon to an after party. And it was put to him that if he agreed, it wasn't suggested to Miss Hand that she wasn't invited to a party at all. He was then asked if the purposes of reserving a suite was to go back there and have sex. And he said, no, it was to have a place of rest and to have an after party. He said, maybe if sex was going to happen, if I was lucky enough, it would. When asked why he didn't go home, he said, after being on a night out, you're not exactly your freshest. So back then, 6 years ago, it would have been his routine to go and do something like this. You wake up the next morning, get refreshed and go back to normal life, as he put it. He was asked if they were waiting around for the suite to become available at midday, to which he said no. They were driving through the city. They were going around different places. And it was also put to him in regards to the tinted windows and electric blinds in the car. He said that we heard evidence yesterday from Danielle that there was tinted windows and also electric blinds. Mr. McGregor said no, they were visors, shade visors for the sun with tinted glass. That there was nothing really added from the garage. It was just those electric blinds that he said were like sun visors. It was put to him that he was suggesting that Miss Hand had the ability to see where she was going, and he said yes. Then they questioned him in relation to ending up at James Lawrence's house. So it was put to him that he walked up, went in, and he was in there for about 20 minutes, half an hour. He said he was only in there for about 10. He said he went in, he stated his case. He told them there was two ladies asking for him. He went out to the car first and then he followed him out. It was then put to him that there was a bag of cocaine with him when he came out of this house. And he said there was a small bag of coke and crystal. There was not much, but a small bit. It was then put to him that evidence has been that you come out of James Lawrence's house with cocaine. And he said, no, there was cocaine in the vehicle. Mr. Gordon said, that's not true. You come out of the house with a bag of cocaine in your hand. And he said, there was only a small amount. It was 10 a.m. He said both girls in the car were given cocaine, to which McGregor replied, in the car, I believe so. It was then put to him that he had cocaine in the car as well. And he said, correct. So then Mr. Gordon brings him back to the interview he gave to Gardaí on the 17th of January at 4:30 in the afternoon. He said, you were asked about the tampon in that interview and you didn't take the opportunity then to say to Gardaí that there was no tampon. And Mr. McGregor said, I said my story to my lawyers and I went on advice that they gave me. It was then put to him, Mr. Gordon said, can I bring you to something else entirely now? He asked, do you recall in the course for evidence, Nikita Hand has repeatedly said that she was frightened, to which Mr. McGregor said, okay. It was then put to him that she said she was worried. He said, let me give you one example of this. This is the evidence from Garda Ryan, who made note of what she said to him when he interviewed her at her home. So this is when Garda Ryan interviewed Nikita Hand at her home.
Is this on the 10th then of December?
Yes.
This is the day that she went to the Rotunda Hospital.
Yes. And he quotes this as, this is a quotation from Garda Ryan's statement. And this is what Nikita Hand said. She said, tried to fight. He choked her, chokehold a few times. So she stopped struggling. Nose person, afraid for me and my family. Mr. Gordon said she was terrified, to which Mr. McGregor's legal team said, this is absurd. The judge then said to Mr. Gordon, you can put it to the witness that Mr. McGregor did frightening things to her, but otherwise you're asking for a comment, to which she said, was she frightened? And Mr. McGregor said, we can all safely take from all the unbiased evidence we've seen that there was excitement. There was the clear character of Nikita Hand all the way through that night was excitement and that she was in a good mood. Then that was the end of the cross-examination by Mr. Gordon for Nikita Hand's legal team, but there was a quick rebuttal from his legal team. So it was just to deal with a small matter. So he said to Mr. McGregor, in regards to the interview you gave in the early hours of the morning, the one where you say you were shocked by the photographs, you make a specific reference to the tampon. She did not tell me she was wearing a tampon. Mr. McGregor said yes. Mr. Farrell then asks him, was that aspect of Nikita Hand's statement put to him? And he said yes. He then asked, was it put to you that Mr. Lawrence had sex with Nikita Hand? And he said yes. The judge then asked, had Mr. McGregor been cautioned before these interviews? And he agreed that he had been. So these are the Guardian interviews. It was then put to him that in the interview at 11:14 a.m, that up to that point, Gardaí said they didn't have, you don't have to say anything. If you do not mention one question, something you may relate or rely on in court, you at this point mentioned Mr. Lawrence, and he agreed. He said yes. So that was Conor McGregor for the day. The jury handed up a note to the judge just at the end of Conor McGregor's testimony, and the jury were asked to leave. Upon their return, he addressed the jury and said, you may not have been in the room when I gave somebody a dressing down for using their phone the other day, but he said that he had inquired and two of the people you thought were on their phones and using them improperly were actually journalists. And he then said the other two were simply buffoons who took out their phones to take messages.
And this is the second time the jury has sort of sent a note directly to the judge, who's Justice Alexander Owens. The first time it was concerns they had that somebody was using a phone in the public gallery, which overlooks where they're sitting, and that they may have been taking photographs in the courtroom.
Yeah, there were concerns that there may have been photographs or videos, or that they may have had, their main concern was that their images were going to be circulated online at that point.
It's a small courtroom, you said.
It's a very small courtroom.
Yeah, so it's full.
Full to the brim, even more so today, obviously with Conor McGregor on the stand yesterday and then there again today. There was more media, there was more public, and there was a lot of interest in the case.
And are there people outside?
Yes, even more so today leaving court than I've seen before. Media, photographers, videographers, news channels, and just members of the public waiting. Some just, don't really know what's going on. It's kind of just standing there waiting, and other people knowing what's happening and waiting to see what's going on.
Exactly. And presumably some people hoping to catch a glance of Conor McGregor, because of course he is a huge star, a UFC champion. Is his father still with him? He has been with him most of the days of the trial.
Yeah, he's still there with him.
And he is collected somewhere outside the court and driven away every day. Yeah, okay. Well, we are going to break for part 2 when because these are long days in court and huge amount of evidence you're going through and you're giving us. I've been getting quite a lot of feedback on how comprehensive your reporting is. It's really good, but it is long. So we're going to break up the podcasts, and we're going to take the second part as a separate podcast where we'll handle the rest of the evidence.
Yes.
Which is largely that of James Lawrence.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Clodagh.
Thank you.
I'm Nicola Tallant, and you're watching Crime World, a podcast about criminals, drugs and the underworld in Ireland and across the globe. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you can be the first to watch all our latest episodes. You can also listen wherever you get your podcasts.